We've never connected before, but really happy to have you interact with our team today. Dr. Mathur, I think you're still muted.
Yeah, okay, I'm happy to be here. Please start whenever you are ready.
Yes. So I think, I'm just here to just welcome everyone, and Khyati is going to be moderating our session today. And very excited that, we're going to be discussing this topic because our team actually wrote a blog on digital infrastructure recently, and we are all experiencing, I feel, in some way, this digital divide because a lot of us work with NGOs and we work with communities on the ground who don't have access to this new sort of digital economy. And we're seeing that divide become, of course, regional in terms of rural and urban, but also income. There's an income component to it, and there's, of course, a gender component to it, with women having less access to devices and digital infrastructure. So this is one of the burning questions which our entire team has. As you can see, the team is well represented, and we're going to have more people joining in over the course of the talk. And we all have burning questions for you. Kathy already has a list of questions and people who will be asking. So this will be very interactive, and it won't just be you talking. All of us really want to speak. I will just encourage the whole team, guys, please keep your videos on, so that you can be more tuned into the conversation, and we can all benefit from this time that Dr. Mathur has taken to speak with us. And Dr. Mathur, we really appreciate this. We really appreciate your taking the time to interact with all of us. So with that, Khyati, over to you.
Right. Thanks. Thank you, Mithali. Thank you, Dr. Mathur, for joining us today for this session. Mithali has already set a context of what we as a research group are, Nicor Associates. From your background, from the kind of work that you have done in Asian and African countries, with the sort of international organizations that you have worked with over so many years, and you yourself are an economist, Ph.D. There is so much to, I think, today to learn from you and your experience, especially to sort of understand from an Indian context, where are we currently from a digital infrastructure point of view, and where can we head given the sort of experience that you would have with the different countries that you have worked in. The group in itself, although we all are public policy enthusiasts, but we also, a lot of us are right now currently in universities and colleges, doing economics and courses related to economics. And some of us are ourselves aligned with international organizations, as well as with government organizations in India. So we're really excited to have you here. And I would definitely open the stage to you to hear your thoughts and views on today's discussion.
Well, thank you, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. It's always a pleasure to be with young people, to hear the enthusiasm and the desire to learn some more. Hopefully, I have some things to add here. My job here is to look at what we can learn from other countries. What can India learn for digital infrastructure? But let's first generally look at what India can learn from other countries before we move to digital infrastructure. India is a large, diversified, democratic country. Makes it pretty unique. There aren't too many large, diversified, democratic countries. So when we try, so the US is one example of a large, diversified, democratic country. And Indonesia is another example, though at times it has not quite been democratic. So if you are looking at large, diversified, and democratic, you have only three countries, India, US, and Indonesia. Others are either large or not diversified, or they're not democratic. So it's really very hard to apply lessons from any other country. If you take a small country like New Zealand or Sweden or Denmark, to say I can apply them to India, or maybe you can apply them to half a city in India, right? Because the population is 5 million. 5 million is a small city in India. So it's really hard to say that we can learn much from any other country. But we will learn something when I'll come to it in a minute. But let me just give you my overall message first, so that you know what is where we are headed and what is going to come from me. So my overall message is that I'm optimistic. Okay, India has some gaps and weaknesses in digital infrastructure, which Mithali pointed out so well. And we have been talking about these gaps for 20 years. First, it was a question of people not having laptops. And there was a scheme around the world, one laptop per child. And then the UP chief minister was giving out laptops to college students. But then we shifted to digital, meaning it became all wireless, right? So we are now, the same digital divide is the same for last 20 years, and a digital divide remains. But let me say that India has made great uh, enough success, and we do have great potential. And we have the means to realize this potential. So it's not a pessimistic message at all. I have talked, after agreeing to talk to you, I've talked to several people whom I know in various fields. And the message is that yes, India can do it. We can be a regional power in digital infrastructure within 5 to 7 years, and we can be world class in 10 years. So really, India does have the potential, and that's the optimistic part. Obviously, we aren't there yet, but we can be there. And the biggest obstacle, as I see it, perhaps because I'm an economist, is finance, is money. How do we build it? How do we make sure that everybody has it? And that's a lesson that we can learn, especially from other countries, such as how can we get this thing done? So uh, in short, the message is that we have the skills, we have the abilities, and more importantly, we have young people who are interested. I mean, not many of you are techies, but I'm also in touch with young techies. And they're all eager and excited. And not only they're eager and excited, they're actually doing things. They are actually creating new things. They are actually able to do it. And one advantage they have being in India is that we can have scale. So you come up with one idea for one little thing. Well, that one little thing is going to be made in millions, not in one. One example uh, could, whatever little app or whatever little device or gadgets that you come up with, you're going to make, if it is successful, the rewards are rich. You can make lots of them, keeps costs down, gives you profitability, gives you scale. And that is the attraction of India at the moment. That, and also the incomes are rising. So you have a market and you have the possibility of doing things. So that's why my message is optimistic. Okay, so that's the message. So let's step back from the message and go a little deeper into it. And I won't go into too much detail. I'll rather have a conversation. Uh, and let's just go into what is infrastructure. What did we mean by infrastructure before we came to digital? It used to mean transport, which means roads, ports, railways. It used to mean electricity. It used to mean telephones. And way back before any of you was perhaps born, telegrams. Uh, Piped gas, which is still not so common in India, but certainly it's coming up in some places. We are using cylinder gas, but piped gas, water supply. And the characteristic for all of them was that they required heavy capital investment. Before you could do anything, you had to build. You have to build the whole road. You can't build half the road and say, okay, I'll finish it later, because it's going nowhere. You have to build the full road, right? You have to make electricity, you can build in parts. And it has taken India a bit too long to get electricity to everyone, but at least the wires are now out everywhere, right? Almost, the government says we have electrified every home. Well, maybe not, but still it is a job that is done. But what was the problem was that all this heavy capital investment, the returns took a long time to come, and they didn't really come very directly. Okay, so you build a road, until toll roads came, there was no way to charge for the road. So you had to find some other ways to charge for the road, which would be, say, a tax on petrol or a car tax or some other way. And the returns were not direct. The returns were in terms of economic development. You were hoping that there'll be economic development, and from that you would be able to get some benefits to the country. And perhaps from that, you would get some tax revenues. Plus, economists saw all this as natural monopolies. So what happened was that infrastructure had to be developed with the government, by the government, or with government help. So in the past, most of the infrastructure development was done by the government. And so the government was either taxing or borrowing money in some fashion or the other to do the infrastructure. And we didn't really see much private investment in India in any infrastructure, though, the first power plant in India was built in Calcutta by a private company, 1880s at that time. But and also I think in Mumbai, the first electricity supply was from private companies, but all that vanished soon and it all became government. So this is infrastructure as it used to be before we started talking about digital infrastructure. And now when we come to digital infrastructure, it's a bit different from any other infrastructure. Why? Because you have to do both the hardware and the software. You have to have the hardware and you have to have the software. So in India, because it is so large and diversified, we have to have the software in different languages with different kinds of people in mind. We don't have the uniformity. So let's talk about hardware first. In hardware, we actually are seeing much progress, but we still have some weaknesses. So we have a cellular network in India that is pretty good, but all it does is voice and text. You can make phone calls and you can send text messages. Otherwise, the cellular network is really not suitable for much more. And that we have a reasonable stretch, uh, even in villages, outside in rural areas, you can get voice and you can get text. So the cellular network is not so bad at all. Wi-Fi, this is sorely lacking. They even in big cities. I'm currently working with an NGO called FEA. FEA runs in Delhi and they connect low-income students. They are now, to their classroom. Classroom is now with Zoom. And many of them have network issues. What are network issues? They don't have a good signal. They can't afford it. So they don't turn on the video because they can't really afford to spend the money on video. So this is Delhi. And you go out, I've talked to people who are working in South India, and they say, we try to teach through online, but most of the students don't have the stuff. We cannot do anything much in terms of education because the signal is weak or people don't have the devices. So we see that the Wi-Fi is weak, but Wi-Fi is being done by private people. It's not being done by government, same as cellular. So here's the first difference between the old infrastructure and the digital infrastructure. It's all being done by the private sector. We had BSNL, but BSNL has faded away, thank God. Nobody wants to use BSNL. It is some grandpa's time or something. Nobody knows what it is. And certainly nobody wants to have anything to do with it. But we don't, so we have private investment. This is part of the problem. The private investment will take place only if it is profitable. But it is not profitable to provide high speed. Actually, in India, it's very tough to get what you can call as high speed Wi-Fi anywhere. What people call as internet broadband is actually always on in internet or always on Wi-Fi, but it's not high speed. People routinely in other countries have 1 gigabyte 500 megabytes. In India, you get 10, 12, 15, 30 megabytes. That's pretty good. And once you go out, so we are really lacking in the Wi-Fi. And we will see that it has created a problem when we come to software. So what we see is that we have a reasonable cellular network for text and for voice, and we have a very weak Wi-Fi. So we are proud that Google is providing free Wi-Fi at railway stations, in some selected railway stations. I don't know if that's still the case, but that's what they were doing, provided 30 minutes of Wi-Fi. That itself shows you that the Wi-Fi network is weak and people can't afford it. But on the other hand, we can also talk about beyond Wi-Fi, satellite and drones. And we do have the capacity. People are using drones in cricket matches to be referees, right? We are using Wi-Fi's now. The government has just announced the property cards, and property cards are very important for rural areas. And the land is going to be laid out by drones. So, and there is satellite data. So we do have the capacity in India on drones and on satellite data. Just we haven't begun to use it. This is the first time I've heard of drones being used in the form of rural digital infrastructure, because what the scheme says is that the drone will lay out the property lines and you can download your property card. Now, how you will download it when you don't have Wi-Fi of any strength, that's beyond me. But at least it's a step forward. We are thinking of using drones, and the people who are working on agriculture in India are actually using satellite data. Okay, let me stop here and see if there are any questions or comments.
Right. So if anybody would like to pose any question at this particular stage,
Yeah. Okay.
sure. Go, please go ahead.
Okay. Hello. My name is Eva. I'm coming from Indonesia. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. This is I already met with Subodh before. My question is, you say that the infrastructure should be conducted by the government and only by the government. Do you think there is a room also for the private sector or for non-government organization to also involve in the infrastructure projects kind of things?
Ever know what I said was, in the past, the infrastructure used to be done by the government. You know me very well, and you know that in Indonesia, what I did was with the private sector way back. So Eva and I know each other since 1995. And so I have worked with her on private sector development of infrastructure in rural electrification. So, but still, even in Indonesia, the power company is owned by the government. The main power company is owned by the government, and the parts that we were talking, and even the rural infrastructure, the first big project was done by the power company. So no, I'm not saying, I'm saying in the digital, we are looking at private investment, partly because the governments don't have the money. It's a reality check. The governments just don't have the money. They are too busy subsidizing this and subsidizing that, or looking after this or looking after that. And they just don't have the money to honestly to look at all the infrastructure. We have to build roads, we have to build bridges, we have to build this, we have to build that. And the governments just don't have the money to spend on this. So apart from any theory, if you look at the total up the infrastructure needs, it's going to have to be done with private investment. There's no way. And in the digital business, the precedent has already been laid. The cell phones are all run by the private sector. The Wi-Fi is run by the private sector. And even the drones, etc., the satellite data will all come from the private sector, but it will have to be some form of a public-private partnership. Okay, so let me move on to the software side. And this is actually the more important part, though, as in the hardware side, India is certainly not at regional world class, not at regional class. We need to build it, but this is not high tech stuff. This is not something that is unknown in India that we can't do. It's a question of the government subsidizing this to some extent, right? Because ultimately you're going to try to reach people, as Mitali pointed out, who are poor or people who live in rural areas. And there has to be a subsidy scheme. Now, that's a lesson we can learn from other countries, that you have to put together a scheme by which subsidy money is available. We did a project for the World Bank. I designed a project for the World Bank in Uganda in the year 2000. And it was supposed to be an electricity project, but we included what used to be called ICT, Information Communication Technologies at the time. Uganda had a subsidy fund. We financed the subsidy fund, and we got the cellular infrastructure out in the villages. At that time, they didn't have the cellular. We're talking 20 years ago, at a time when it used to cost $10 a minute in Uganda to make a phone call to the US. After the cellular structure came, it was 20 cents a minute, right? So it's a huge difference. And we also tried to put in the internet, at least in the district headquarters in Uganda, but that was 20 years ago. So the government subsidy fund is there even in the US, but US also has gaps in both in the cellular and the Wi-Fi, and those gaps have been badly exposed by the pandemic as they have shifted to online schooling. You find that in certain states, the children don't have Wi-Fi at home, or actually there's no Wi-Fi in the place where they live because nobody is providing it, or they don't even have the cellular system in the place where they live. So they actually have to go to, if they want the Wi-Fi, they have to go to some shop or some place and beg them, can I log into, or if it's open. So we do need a government fund to subsidize the spread of Wi-Fi. And right now, I don't see such a government fund, but maybe there is a government fund in India. But this is certainly the case that the private sector cannot do it on its own because it's not profitable enough. The technology is there. The people know how to do it. It's just a matter of getting it done. And instead of all these court fights that are going on with Vodafone and so on, it's much better if they focused on getting this thing out. Okay, suppose we get the Wi-Fi infrastructure out there, and whatever else comes after that, the technology is always changing. The software, this is, I think, the critical part. And we learned this lesson even in electricity when we did rural electrification, that it's not enough to provide electricity because you don't see the benefits. People are able to see TV at night, and that's great. And I like that a lot because people everywhere should be able to see TV. Why not? I mean, why should only the well-off have TV? That the poor rural people also have some fun. After all, their life is pretty rough and tough. So why not have some TV? Okay, fine. But there are no economic benefits. So we are trying to do what we call as productive uses of electricity to make sure that we get returns. Now, in the case of digital infrastructure, so I've defined 5 categories. 1, agriculture. 2, education. 3, health. 4, finance. And 5, dealing with the government. So dealing with the government means you should be able to do the things that you do with the government online, right? You don't have to go to the government office like most of us now don't go to the bank, right? We are able to do everything online with the bank. We can do it from the smartphone. Last time I went to India, there were no crowds in the bank. I said, why? They said, sir, everybody is doing it from home. Why are they coming here, right? There's no need to come here. So instead of a crowded bank, it was an empty bank because people are able to. So same thing is that with the government, you have to get a license, you have to get an approval, you have to fill a form. Like we are now doing with GST, let's not discuss the pros and cons with the GST, but the GST is essentially online, right? You don't have to go to the government office. You have to do things online. So that's a form of dealing with the government. But there are many, many things that we deal with the government, not when you are students and so on, but when you are in business, when you have to get permits, when you have to get approvals. There was a story recently from Maharashtra from a young person who tried to convert his agricultural land into industrial land to set up a factory to create jobs. 36 approvals needed and impossible to get, right? Impossible to get, and 36, and 1 year later, not in a row. That can all go into digital. The software must be developed. And obviously, it has to be, when I say large, diversified country, now we are talking about software in the local language, because hardly 18% of the people even understand English, and maybe 10% can actually fill a form in English, right? It's not going to reach the masses until you have an ability to deal with the government online, just as you are able to deal with some of the private sectors, right? So if you can send an order online via WhatsApp without filling out great forms and they deliver to you, you should be able to have the same facility. So somebody has to develop this infrastructure. This is, I call it infrastructure, but it's really apps, right? And no one's going to develop those apps unless there's some profit in those apps, right? So let's go back up to the top. Agriculture. Uh, Recently, we have heard this term ag tech, agricultural tech. There are a lot of people I know. I'm on a WhatsApp group with young Indians who are doing ag tech. They are looking to reach out to farmers with satellite data to better understand what's happening to the crop, so you don't have to have land. All this and the use of drones. But unfortunately, we are still not yet ready to help agriculture enough. There are people working on it, and young people, but it's not enough. I mean, we don't have productivity increases in agriculture coming from the digital side. Much could be done. There's a lot of I'm not an agriculture specialist, but I participate in this WhatsApp group every day. They write stuff that I ignore now because it's too complicated. But if you let them in, they will come in and do it. So really what needs to happen is the chief ministers have to make up their mind to facilitate these groups and bring them in to the state and say, listen, do it for me. Because forget the national level. India is large and diversified. You have to have it in the local language for the local circumstances. That incidentally has been what I've been writing for the last 3 to 4 years. We got to stop looking to the union government. We got to also realize that the chief minister and the state governments are very powerful, very important. And for example, what we see now in the agricultural bill, let's not debate it, but let's just say that some parts of it are good, but it doesn't really change the productivity, right? It's a pricing system change, it's a regulatory change, and we can discuss it forever, but it's not aimed at increasing the productivity. So we need something that's aiming at productivity. Okay. Second is education. And here we are terribly, terribly weak. There's no way that we can teach anything online. There's so much information available on the internet, and yet those who need it the most are unable to get it, partly because it's in English and they are not fluent in English, and partly because the infrastructure is too weak to actually support. I mean, yes, they can watch songs on video and they'll watch porn on video, but they won't watch educational videos, right? So, you know, don't be critical of people who entertain themselves on YouTube, because what else do they do with their entertainment? This is it. But we also need to have good educational video attuned to the local people in the local language, so that at least the smart kids stuck in small places can actually tap it. Those who are motivated, they can tap it. Right now, they can't do it. I mean, you do see it. I write frequently on Quora, and I have some high school students from tier 2 cities who read me. I'm not important. The fact is they're tapping the internet. So, but we aren't able to do this on a large scale. If you're going to have people, 60% of the people live in villages or small towns, and if they are going to come out without any ability to tap this whole knowledge, then they are not you can provide them anything, if they digital infrastructure, but if they don't have the ability to tap it, this is no use. We are really badly lacking on it. There's one group I know, they said that they were doing classes in the villages. They're a tech savvy group, very high tech group running in South India. Then COVID comes, they can't do those classes anymore. They go out and check, can we do online? More than 50% of the students don't have the capacity, physical capacity. And also they don't have the mental capacity, because they can perhaps listen to their teacher when they're sitting in the classroom, but listening to an app doesn't cut it. It just doesn't cut it. You don't have the ability, you don't have the human support, you don't have any familiarity with it. No one knows anything. You're just wasting your time. There's an article in a professor at IIT Bombay saying that, look, this thing's not easy to do in India. And that's because we have to figure it out. We haven't done it at all enough. Okay. Next, we come to health. You can see that we have not used the digital infrastructure in the COVID at all, right? It's like, what? Nothing to do with digital, it has to do with testing. People have to go here and there. Nobody is using the digital infrastructure to issue instructions or to give information or to give help or to do telehealth, telemedicine, nothing. It is a complete, not even a topic, right? It's not even a topic that I read of. Maybe you know about it, but I certainly don't. So that's really sad. We need to work on the health aspects, because now we've seen what happens in a pandemic. People just don't know what the hell's going on. It's all vague and false and so on. And the doctors cannot provide information. And the fourth is finance. I already dealt with dealing with the government, which was my fifth. Finance. Now, finance actually, we have a better start than for health and education. There are loans being made over the internet. Recently, I posted an article where a microfinance company based in Hyderabad made a loan to a woman living 70 kilometers from Jaipur in a village. Okay, so she goes to the local meeting, puts her thumbprint on an iPad because of Aadhaar. And this is very important. Because of the Aadhaar card, they can validate the thumbprint within 10 seconds. They also have credit reports, and they can validate the credit report, and then they can approve her loan, and then they can transfer it to her bank account same day. So this is what a few years ago, the chief economic advisor had called JAM, Jan Dhan account, which is your bank account, A for Aadhaar, and M for mobile. So you open the bank account, which is physical. You have the Aadhaar card, which is digital, because it can be validated digitally. And then you have your mobile, which actually they are not able to use that well, but yes, you can do digital benefit transfer. So that the government is doing, and it's a merge of finance and the government. They are doing digital benefit transfer. Just today, I read that they're going to install power meters in Karnataka for farmers. And then whatever the bill is on that meter, right now they're paying a lump sum, but now they will have power meters. Whatever is the bill, the government will do a DBT, direct benefit transfer. So they'll read the bill and they will do a direct benefit transfer into the farmer's account, and then the farmer will pay the discount. A much, much better solution than what we have so far, because all that leads to fraud and waste and corruption. So the DBT, the direct benefit transfer, is part of JAM, Jan Dhan, Aadhaar, Mobile. So there we have the government and the finance put together. So this is what I'm saying. It's optimistic message that we are able to do things in some fashion, and in some way we aren't able to do it everywhere. So let me stop there. I think I've talked more than I thought I would talk, but it's an exciting topic. So let me stop and let's have a discussion and let's have questions.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Mathur. I think we have a set of questions pouring in. Firstly, Mithali, would you like to, have any sort of questions which you would want to pose at this stage?
So I think, I found 2 points very interesting, Dr. Mathur, I think from what you said. The first thing was about the role of state governments, in facilitating the adoption of digital infrastructure, and also just in general, reaching out to private sector and having these PPPs. But I just feel, and this is not a question. I think you please feel free to react to this after hearing everyone else's questions. But the what we are noticing more and more is sort of the fiscal situation of the states getting much worse. One with the pandemic, and also with the fact that a number of their revenue sources are getting squeezed. So it becomes very difficult in that sense, because with ADB as well as with World Bank, we've approached a number of state governments on just even traditional infrastructure loans and things, and their preference has started to become that this external assistance should come via the central government, so that they don't have to take it onto their balance sheet, and it becomes like a situation where they are not the ones actually putting the money on the table. And even with the GST negotiations yesterday, and with the whole new scheme of transfers being announced to the states, this entire balance of power between the center and the states is starting to become very different from what it used to be just even a year ago. So that's the first point that I'd like to react to. And the second thing that I would say, that of course health and education, agriculture, finance, these are of course very important areas. And as you pointed out with the power meters, the DBT. But even more than that, there is a whole area of hybrid infrastructure that we're seeing now, whether it's microgrids, mesh networks, even sort of wastewater generation and wastewater management systems, which are highly automated. So, sort of funneling investment into these high tech spaces also becomes a very big challenge, and looking at how tech can integrate with trunk infrastructure. So, Kathy, I'll stop with that, and then you can please go to the questions.
Yeah, hang on. Let me just respond to this. There's a very important point, the states. Now, everybody knows that the states are broke. Okay, they have no money. The COVID has hurt them even more. The GST is a pain because they are not getting the money they were supposed to get. Okay, they're all, but the same situation was true 5 years ago, 4 years ago, when the states had no money. So what that really means is two things. One, it puts a focus not only on center versus state, it puts a focus on what the hell are they doing with the money that they have? Are they putting it to good use? Because what people don't yet ask, and I ask every day, is are they wasting their money? Are they actually using it in the best possible way? So we need to hold them accountable, right? Number two, what that means is, and I came back to it right from the start, that how do we finance all this? You're rightly talking about wastewater, you're talking about other investments. No government has the money. It's not a question of that if they get the GST allocation, they still won't be able to do it, right? So they don't have the money. So what we are lacking in India, and this is a lesson we can learn from other countries, is how to funnel private money into these somewhat risky ventures, into these ventures that have a long return horizon. We don't yet have any answers, but even these startups in Bangalore, you see they are being financed by American and Chinese money. They don't get they don't get Indian risk capital. Now we do have some people who are doing risk capital, but still many of the startups like Ola and Paytm, they are financed by foreigners. They are not financed locally. We don't have any system of financing our own infrastructure and our own startups in any significant way. So we really need to work on the financial system. That's a lesson that we can learn certainly from the US on how to finance the local infrastructure needs. And if you go to the States, they will say, yes, we have no money. Excuse me, we can't do anything. Yes, they have no money. Everybody knows it. It's been like that for 30 years. They never have any money because whenever they have some money, I mean, they prefer to do farm loan waivers rather than invest in agriculture. So a huge amount of money, you let the problems sit around for 6-7 years. Farmers are broke, they're committing suicides. You take over their loans. The discoms are broke, and you take over their loans. Why the hell are the discoms broke? Why are we spending money on financing the losses of the discoms, right? Why are we spending money on financing things that don't work? So really, we need to learn both things. Stop this business of center versus state. Yes, let it go on. I'm not against it. Let it play out politically and economically. But the fundamentals are that the state government budgets, they need to be more accountable. And more important, they learn how to get uh, private venture capital into this. And finally, let me make another point that we have a lot of people who have made a lot of money in India in the last 20-25 years. They are doing nothing to give it back in any shape or form. They are doing nothing, right? They need to take the risks. They don't need to finance it, but they can co-share the risks. So we still have this idea of the NGOs, they're just going out to give food to the poor and so on, or teach some kid how to do something. But today what we need is for these people to take the risks, to share the risks, to say, listen, you are going to do this investment, I'm going to share the risk. So risk sharing is a very important part that has to be done. So we need financial clever people to set these systems up. There's no shortage of investment money in India. We have a high savings rate. The private sector doesn't invest enough. So we need to get that investment into all of these productive areas. So let me stop there because I'm sure there are many other questions.
Right. Thank you, Doctor. I think we'll move on to Mr. Sunil Kulkarni. If you are on the call, which I can see that you are, if you'd like to pose your question, and if I can just request if everyone would be posing their questions, if you can start with a very short introduction, that'll be great. Thank you.
Okay, I see his question here. So maybe I'll just read it out. The question is, how can India grow to USD 5 trillion by 2025? Kindly indicate 10 steps to make it happen. Well, actually, that's not possible. You know, this is a hype. India cannot be 5 trillion by 2025. Mr. Piyush Goyal told us not to do mathematics, but unfortunately, some of us can't help ourselves. We do the mathematics, and we know that we can't reach 2025 by 5 trillion by 2025. And certainly with the COVID, even if there was the faintest of hopes, it's not going to happen. Anyway, and I have several answers on Quora about this, so let me not give those answers here because this is about digital infrastructure. I have written several times on Quora about it. So if you go to my Quora.com, you will find it there as to what India should do to reach a 10% GDP growth rate. I've written many times. Let me not answer it here.
Right. Mr. Devang is with us on the session. If you would like to pose your question, Devang.
Sorry, hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, can you? Yeah, hi. Hello, Mr. Mathur. My name is Devang. I'm a student at the University of Chicago, and I'm currently working with Mithani and Nicole Associates. So my question to you is actually like on the policy of digital infrastructure. So obviously we see that after the pandemic, digital inequity is going to be something that is going to become an increasing issue. And like you talked about that, like governments are a part of how we address digital infrastructure. But my question was also like, how do we make digital infrastructure a policy priority among governments? Because, like you said, like governments are still today focusing on farm waivers and focusing on policies like that, while digital infrastructure doesn't that much come into focus. So, how do we ensure that something like that could become that important?
The only way you can make it as a priority is by showing the benefits to the voters. Okay. Politicians only care about how to get a vote. Okay, they want to get votes. So if you can show that what you are doing will help certain groups or certain people, and they might actually vote for you, then you have the politician's ear. There's no way you can get a politician to focus on it in abstract or in terms of economic development. Maybe some, but mostly they are not interested in that. So what you have to actually do is, as I said, go to the software side of it and say, listen, if I can do this in health, then this is what will happen to these people. And this is how their health will improve, and maybe they'll vote for you. Don't say that, but they will understand it. And that's the way you will get the priority. That's why I said the hardware is a different issue and the software is a different issue. The politicians couldn't care less about the hardware mostly, but they do care about education, health. If you can show the benefits to the farmers, if you can show the benefits to the women, if you can show the benefits to small and medium enterprises. So I would go at it. If at all it works, it'll go from the other side, from the benefit side, not from some policy decisions coming out of some classroom or some professor. It doesn't work. You have to go to show the benefits to the local people on the ground. If at all it works, still they can ignore you because they are going to win their elections based on non-economic criteria. And that we leave aside as a subject here. But non-economic criteria are very important in Indian elections. And we leave that aside because it's not a place to discuss politics. Okay, anybody else?
We have Chani Ganesh with us. I think Chani has a set of questions. Chani, if you would like to pose your questions, please.
Hi. I think I'll just ask one question, and then if we have time, I'll go on to my others. So I think India's digital divide, like many other digital divides across the world, has a caste problem. Like in any heterogeneous society, access to the internet or digital devices largely delineated by caste. So, like in the US, I think it's about a third of Native Americans don't have internet access, and India is no different. I was doing some research, and almost 80% of undergrad students from the SE community don't have access to the internet. So, when we talk about ensuring access to all, how do we make sure that these communities are not left out of the conversation? How do we ensure that uh, when we're trying to bridge the urban rural divide, we do that equitably?
Uh, Obviously, if you talk to somebody who's more socially oriented, they'll give you a different answer. But let me give you the answer from the point of view of an economist. What is really the case is that they can't afford the capital investment to be part of the digital infrastructure. They have, let's put it in economic terms, they have high discount rates. They need to get the benefits from their investment right away. They cannot wait for the benefits because they have to eat, they have basic needs, they have basic requirements, and they don't have access to the capital markets, or they cannot get a low interest loan so that they can actually finance this infrastructure investment, whichever little they have to make, whether it's a smartphone costing 20,000 rupees, that's quite a bit of capital investment for the household. And so actually the part of the problem in all of these seemingly social issues is that India's capital markets, financial markets don't work well. They don't let you finance your investments. Now, buying a cell phone may not seem an investment, but if it's 20,000 rupees and your parents earn 9,000 rupees a month, spending 20,000 rupees is an investment. And even if you're going to get some returns from it fairly soon, there's no way to finance this in the current system. So part of the problem is, of course, social. There's no question about it. But you aren't asking me to talk about social issues. I'm not an expert on it. and in the rural areas, it is certainly an issue that upper caste may not tolerate lower caste people having expensive and nice equipment, cell phones, etc., because it would perhaps remove the social inequalities present. So this is an issue which I cannot give you any answers on. But I would say that if we had better credit markets, if people were able to finance their purchases, I mean, after all, uh, everybody takes credit to buy a car, right? So why can't people take credit to buy a cell phone or a smartphone and be able to pay for it in installments? So we need that. As I say, we need it, but that's not a solution because we don't have it, and we are not going to get it in any short period of time. So it will remain this remains a very tough issue because the social forces are against it, the economic forces are against it. All you can hope is that it will spread from the cities to the villages. In the cities, there isn't that much discrimination. You can buy the equipment, and if you can transport it and transfer it to your family, then that works. But trying to actually break this barrier in the villages, I don't have any answer to it. Maybe somebody else does, but let me be honest, I don't have the answer. Getting credit would help, and if the family in the city can transfer it, that might work.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have Soumya with us. Soumya, if you would like to pose your question, please.
Sure. Thank you, Kathy. Good evening, sir. So my question is, as per the McKinsey report on Digital India, they are saying that the core digital sector has the potential to more than double and create around 60 to 65 million jobs by 2025, and which specifically requires functional STEM skills. Now, if we put a gender lens to it, we see that there is a disproportionately limited number of female students in the STEM and technical fields. Now, given this, um, given this divide that already exists in the skilled labor force in the urban settings, do you think that rural India, especially women in rural areas, would benefit with this growth? Or rather, it would just widen the gap, not just between rural and urban perspective, but also on a gender perspective?
I think, it can certainly be done with the help of interested people like NGOs. Like, when the uh, telephones reached villages in Bangladesh, what Grameen, which is actually an NGO, not just a bank, what Grameen did was that they provided the phones to women, and they were called phone ladies. And instead of creating a kiosk or something, you could go to the phone lady and you could make a call, or you could receive a call. So that's how they empowered the women over there, so that they could actually make some money, and they could be part of the emerging cellular network, which everybody couldn't afford a phone at that time. We're talking 15, 20 years ago. So there has to be a concerted action. But in general, if you look at electricity, you might think it has no meaning, but the reach of electricity does benefit the women. Uh, Certainly they can watch their serials at night, and they can also get some information. So you are talking about two separate issues. One is, do they participate in the production of this technology, which is the STEM part? And the second part is, do they benefit from the spread? Now, they certainly benefit from the spread. There is no question whatsoever, because ultimately the aim is to make it, so to speak, a non-STEM appliance, easy to use. It's like a pressure cooker. You don't have to have a degree to use a pressure cooker, right? So you don't have to have a degree to use the app on the phone. The app should be that easy and that intuitive, that everybody can use them, educated or not. Of course, you need some literacy, but the literacy rate for women, the older women, the literacy rate is lower. For the younger women, the literacy rate is reasonably much higher, right? So if they are going to come out now from school, at least they are literate, and the apps should be made so that they can handle it. So on the benefit side, I would say, yes, surely they should be able to benefit from it, because you can have apps oriented towards women. You can have general apps which are also of benefit to women. So no issue. The only thing is apps should be easy to use. But then the men are also not so skilled. So anyway, that's not an issue. On the production side, there is certainly an issue because the software business tends to be heavily male oriented and male dominated. There are some women, but even in the US, you find they say, look, I'm an exception. It is a heavily male oriented culture. And it's not STEM, software in particular is, you really don't need these, engineering degrees, or certainly don't need the mathematics. It is a problem that is difficult to solve, because certainly economists don't know how to solve this problem. The problem starts in grade 4 or grade 5, right? And of course, in India, we see this strange thing that women do better in high school, but then they don't do anything science related in college, because in school, it's okay, you are not marked out, but once you are in college, you tend to drop out. Now, there are people who are trying to solve this problem, but it's a tough problem. It's not something that other countries have solved. Now, if you go to Scandinavia, please don't look at Scandinavia. In Scandinavia, you can solve anything you want because of a different kind of culture. But when you look at, as I said, large diversified countries, it's very hard to solve it. It is a social issue at its heart. And I won't say that I know what to do about it. There are friends of mine, women who are PhDs in science. They are interested, they are working in India, they're trying, but it's not an easy problem to solve. So on the benefit side, yes, it's not hard to solve it. On the production side, the jobs, that is not so easy to solve. And I don't see any actually solution to it unless you can motivate the girls to take up these subjects and these jobs right after high school. Because once they finish 2 or 3 years of college, they are not going to go back to it. So sorry, I don't really have a positive answer there.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mathur. We have Manu Pius Panjikaran with us with a set of questions. If you would like to pose your questions.
Sure. Hi, sir. So I've got two questions. My first question is, like post the pandemic, we're kind of seeing a shift in terms of the demand for high-speed networks moving from the cities to the rural tier 3 and other rural parts. And with a lot of the tech companies actually saying that work from home could be the new norm, are we seeing a shift in demand? And with the shift in demand, does it make it economically viable for the private sector to cater to this demand? And will this then spill over to all sections of the society? And if so, then does the equation in terms of the government's role more than financing, does it become in terms of creating a facilitative regulatory environment?
I didn't understand the question on the shift in demand. The shift in demand for what?
So, sir, if you look into earlier, in terms of you have most of the software developers, everyone concentrated in the cities. So the need for high-speed internet was more acknowledged by the corporate space, by the corporate sector to be in like the tier 1 cities or the metro cities. But now we are seeing that with the work from home situation, we are having these people work from their hometowns, which are mostly in villages. So with that happening, with the demand then shifting to the rural region, would the private sector then try to plug in this need?
This is certainly an emerging trend. Just a couple of days ago, I read about the head of the Zoho Corporation, guy called Sridhar Vembu. Are you talking about him?
Yeah, him and several others who are actually planning or working on such a model.
Yeah, so that's a great idea to shift to tier 2 and tier 3 cities. Tier 3 cities really, I mean, for many years I've been saying that the smart cities should be the district headquarters apart from the top 5 districts in a state. That's where the growth should be. This is what Vembu is trying to put in. He's going to tier 3 cities. Tier 3 cities means your hometown or your village is 20 to 30 kilometers from this place. and then you work from there. Obviously, you're going to need high-speed internet. I don't know how they are planning to get this high-speed internet because they don't have it. It's certainly happening in the US too. People are shifting to smaller towns because of the lower cost of living. And some companies are actually giving you a $10,000, $15,000 bonus. Say, go live in a cheaper place. Don't bother to come here because then you'll ask for pay raises. Now go and live somewhere else where it is cheap. So Wembu is right. You have to shift people to uh, smaller cities instead of this congested, noisy big cities, unless you want to enjoy the fun of the big city. You don't have any fun in these tier 3 cities. If you look at the city that is mentioned in the Zoho website in Andhra Pradesh, it's near Tirupati. It's just outside Tirupati. Population is 26,000. I doubt you can get Italian food there if that's what you want. So, still some people will prefer to be in the bigger cities, but this is a place where actually the governments should encourage private investment, because how they should do it remains a question which is not yet answered. We are just emerging that really the growth of India in big cities is no more acceptable after the pandemic because there's no place for people to live where they can be safe. There is really no place. All the migrant workers left, all the software people also want to leave because you are in close proximity. Not all, some want to leave. And some, it's certainly a welcome sign to shift to non-district headquarters or even the non-top 5 district headquarters in a state. So you rank the districts in a state, you take the top 5 cities by population, go beyond that. You have space for housing, you have space, you have school. I don't think tier 3 is really a viable solution for many young people because you are bored to death. You don't want to be bored to death. At least I think when I was young, I didn't want to be bored to death. I'm sure you don't want to be bored to death. I just heard from a person who was in the US and he returned to India some almost 1 year ago, and he's told me, I will update you frequently as to how my life is going. He just saying, because of the COVID, I'm stuck in a small town in Uttar Pradesh, and it's hell because it's a small town in Uttar Pradesh. I'd rather be in Bangalore, but nobody wants to let me go to Bangalore. So I think tier 3 cities, if I were to ask me, it'll be hard to build the high-speed internet. Tier 2 cities, much better chance because there's a bigger demand. And by tier 2, I don't include the top 5 cities in the state. So that's my answer. I think it's a great move. The pandemic has forced a great move to people and realize that working from home actually means working from lower cost areas, close to the people where you want to be. 20 kilometers from your village, I think, is perhaps too restrictive because we don't have the high-speed internet and it's not going to come. I forget, you had a second question.
Yeah. So the second question is more around the software aspect that you said. So one thing we've noticed is of the government actually coming up with the Diksha platform in the education space. So in this platform, it's like the government has worked in setting up the platform, and that can be localized and customized a lot depending upon the regions in which it's being deployed by the civil society or other micro entrepreneurs. So how do such platforms work in strengthening the digital infrastructure of the country? And can similar platforms be replicated in other domains in terms of healthcare, agriculture, etc.?
I'm not familiar with this platform. Excuse me. I don't know anything about it. The first time I'm hearing it. But I think, there's no need for the government to do these things. People can create, we have enough private people, bright sparks, who can do this themselves. They can create it themselves. The government doesn't need, the government just needs to subsidize or somehow provide incentives and money. I would not, the government, I think, is this from the union government?
Yeah, this is by the central government, yes.
Yeah, I never call it the central government because that's not a term in the constitution. I always call it the union government, just to remind you that it's not the union, it's not the central government, it's the union government. I think the union government should stop wasting its money in such things, okay? Because the prime minister keeps saying, I'll do it all. I'm not talking about Mr. Modi. I'm talking about prime ministers ever since. They're saying, I'll do it all. Well, actually, Mr. Prime Minister or Mrs. Prime Minister, you can't do it all. The constitution gives powers to states, and forget the constitution. The ground reality is that you, the prime minister, don't know what the hell's happening in all the villages. You think you know, but actually you don't. You don't know the local circumstances and what the hell are the chief ministers supposed to do if you are responsible for everything. What are they doing? Just checking that the streets are swept once in a while? No, they have powers and responsibilities. They know what's the reality. I think the government of the union government should stick to things that are actually national, clearly national in need. The rest, I think the focus should shift to NGO sector, private sector, and to the state governments. And this is one clear example of where we don't really need a national framework. We can do very well. The chief ministers who are proactive, they can get it together and they can start it. We have, Karnataka. I mean, we are bustling with the techies of the world over there. Why are they waiting for the union government to set it up? Right? Why are we waiting in Maharashtra? I mean, you have Pune, which is the second. Why are we waiting in Telangana, which is Hyderabad? These are your three big software places. Why are they waiting for a union government platform? Let them just go ahead and do it. Make it in the local language, get it done. Till the union government comes up with a plan that works in Kashmir and Kanyakumari and Meghalaya. I mean, why waste your time and wait for it? Just get the job done. Find somebody who will do it. Get it done. So that's my view these days. I'm getting old. I'm impatient. I don't want things to be done in 30 years or 15 years. Saying, look, set the trend, get it done. I mean, after all, when Mr. Modi was the chief minister of Gujarat, he reformed the private sector in the electricity. He got it done, right? He didn't wait for union government to give any incentives. Gujarat, the power supply is fantastic, right? You got it done. So same thing, Mr. Chief Minister of Karnataka, please get it done. Mr. Chief Minister of Maharashtra, please get this done. Your education, it's your responsibility in the constitution. Don't wait for this central plan or union government plan to come. Create your own platform. Don't you have enough people in Hyderabad? Telangana is now a small state. They are the techies of the world. Let them do it. They have the money too. Sorry, that's a impassioned answer. So yeah, we need some common platform which people can plug into, but we don't need to wait for the union government to ponderously work it through and make sure that it fits everywhere, and then go through 3 different iterations before it works. I mean, it's like GST. Okay, fine. GST 1, GST 2, GST 3, demonetization one day, next day, second day, third day, fourth day, change the rules all the time because they don't know what's going on. Really, they don't. Okay. Honestly, I mean, I have many friends who work in the civil services. I come from a civil service family. Most of my friends are high powered or used to be high powered civil servants. So I know them very well. I mean, what the heck do they know? They know as much as I do. I'm sitting far away. So let's get it done by the states, people. This is my message. Okay, anybody else?
Thank you, Dr. Mathur. If it is okay with you, we have a final question from
It's
one
fine.
of our team members.
I'm happy to take questions. Let's keep it going.
Right. Mohnish, if you would like to pose your question, please.
Yeah. Hi, I guess so. My question is twofold. The first being, in your opinion, what role has geo played in connecting people and giving phone in the hands of the vast majority of the people, because they're giving away phones and data at such cheap rates? And secondly, although this might be beneficial in terms of reducing the digital divide, but in the future, how can it threaten in terms of becoming a monopoly?
So geo is quite an achievement and quite a threat. The achievement one cannot ignore. because what Jio has done is not only changed things in India, but has made India attractive to foreign investors also, because they see that India will be digital. Right? India
Yeah.
will have the uh, digital infrastructure. People will have phone. Once you have a phone, you want a better phone next year. Okay.
Yeah.
Everybody
Yeah.
wants a better phone next year. So there will be a tremendous market for phones, and there will be a tremendous market for the apps and the services that you can sell via the cell phones, right? So certainly they have done that.
Yes.
Whether they are creating a monopoly, well, they are creating a monopoly, right? There's no
Yeah.
question about it. Geo is a monopoly. Is it an exploitative monopoly? To what extent is it exploitative? To what extent would others have been able to finance and give this rapid rollout of the infrastructure? It remains an open question. There's a
Mhm.
huge investment which the government certainly couldn't have made. No government could have made that investment. Huge capital investment in terms of not only the phones, but in terms of the ability to use the phones on the infrastructure.
Mhm.
So we got a huge private investment. Whenever you have huge private investment, you have risks, right? There's
Yeah.
this. So when we talk about private investment, we know that private investment comes with risk. Private investment comes with a profit motive, and they are
Absolutely.
going to try to make as much of a profit, maybe not in the short run, but in the long run. That's why they are investing, right? So uh, you have to decide which is the option that your society, your country can accept. Either you don't have the massive infrastructure investment,
Mhm.
and you do slowly. If you rely on the government to do it, the government has no money. Okay, forget it. They don't have the expertise and they don't have the money. They can't do it.
Mhm.
Private sector, there it was open to all. It was not like they were reserved. I mean, forget it. There may be some a little bit of this and that here and there in terms of the use of the with bandwidth and so on. But
Suppressing.
we are India. We are not Sweden. We are not Singapore. No, there's corruption. Okay, I mean we live with corruption. We know there's corruption. Okay, it's not. I mean, if I just said, okay, forget it, we're going to do nothing because of corruption, I would say 90% of the countries you couldn't get anything done, right? Corruption is a fact of life. How are you going to accept this corruption? And I'm not going to say who the corrupt people are, but the corruption is there, right? Are we
Mhm.
going to simply say, oh, there's corruption, so we can't do this? So what is your choice? Where are you willing to make this choice of, okay, uh, this infrastructure is done. It's very helpful. It has brought in connectivity to people who could never dream of it otherwise. And they are also now, the phones, you can market your stuff through the phone. There's no exclusivity in terms of what message. I mean, you can send your own WhatsApp message. You can say, listen, I make a better this, and you can send it on WhatsApp to people on Geo, right? Nobody's stopping you to use the infrastructure that they have built. So it's not like a walled garden in which you cannot get your message across. All political parties send their political junk, and I see some of it on WhatsApp to everybody, right? So it's open. So what I'm saying is that, listen, uh, much of capital investment in infrastructure is often accompanied by corruption.
Yeah.
Let it not be said that it is done through honest angels. No, it isn't. It's done with some here and there and whatever. Honestly, Geo has made a difference to India. In terms of looking at the broad picture, if you don't look at the financial side, the benefits are, I mean, I'm not a Geo user. I don't have shares in Reliance of any type. I have nobody I know who works for Reliance, so I'm neutral in this. Or maybe I'm against Reliance. But what the hell? You do see that people are getting the benefits. And was there any other way of getting this benefit to them? The answer is probably not. So
Right.
let's not get stuck on monopoly and future price rises. They will find some other way of making money. You can't get poor people to pay a lot of money. Let's be honest about it. I work very often with poor people, not directly, but providing services. Poor people are poor, no? They don't like to waste their money. And they're not stupid, they're poor. They don't like to waste their money. If you raise the charges, they're going to leave in a jiffy. They're not going
Yeah,
to sticking around to pay you double what they were paying. They can't afford it. They don't want to afford it. So you're not going to suddenly say, listen, I was selling this to you for 10 rupees and now I'm selling it to you for 50. It's not going to work. They don't have the money to make that payment. Now, maybe you can make 12 instead of 10, but you can't double it, you can't triple it, you can't squeeze all their money out of it. They are addicted, but they're not so addicted uh, that they can't afford. Now, look at what's happened in the pandemic. There's a story which I read the other day that, the parents who are putting their kids, low income parents, putting their kids into English medium private schools. By English medium private schools, these are no frill schools. The only thing about them is that they teach in English. Fee is 450 rupees a month. Now the parents can't afford the 450 rupees, so they don't pay the fee. Enough students don't pay the fee. The school collapses because the school cannot pay its teachers.
right, right.
You cannot suddenly tell these parents, you pay 900 rupees, the school is good. No, you can't. There's no money. So I won't worry too much about the very poor being suddenly asked to pay double the money because they won't do it. They'd rather give up the service than pay the money. So, yes, there's all sorts of irregularities. I'm sure I don't know all of them. I'm sure you know better than me. But let's not worry too much. There is a good development impact. And once you have the system set up, somebody can come in and improve it or make it work or whatever. So look at the plus side too.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Mathur. Would anybody else have any sort of questions that they would want to ask?
Well, I have a question.
Yes, please.
I want to hear from anybody who has a bright idea. I love to hear bright ideas. So what's your bright idea? What are you going to do about it? What's your bright idea? You can't tell me all of you smart young people, none of you has a bright idea. So what's your bright idea? Let's hear it.
So I think I want to ask, Ashrut and Laboni, you guys have spent so much time researching the digital infrastructure space, and they were the key sort of researchers that we had on our article as well. So I think I'd also love to hear their ideas, half of which we had to cut out because of the length from the article, but I'm sure they have a lot to say. So Ashrut, Laboni.
Yeah, thanks, Mitali. Thank you so much, Professor. It was
Lamoni, we
really.
can't hear you. You're not audible.
Am I audible now?
Little better, but maybe if you could come a bit closer to the microphone.
Is this better?
I can hear you. Go ahead.
No, so I was just wondering, like, throughout our research that we were doing, so one of my key questions was also related to public-private participation that you answered through Eva and Manu's question anyway, which was, like you said, the government often does not have money to do all these projects, and it has so many things on its plate. This is definitely a priority, but it may not extend as much to tier 2 and tier 3 cities given the demand and like several factors that are involved. So one thing that we were also wondering during our research was that um, you know how about like loans and these funds that are there, if not a credit for each individual buyer to buy phones, how about credit, especially a special kind of support to these organizations, to these private firms to kind of take the project forward and build these digital infrastructure like these facilities, at least if not optical fibers, at least towers, because I remember even now when you go to like villages and you visit them, often you wouldn't find a Geo or a Vodafone network. It'll probably a BSNL, poor BSNL network at best. So if not, if there aren't already existing incentives for private partnerships in the rural sector, why not have these specialized funds for them, which probably the government may not exactly fund 100%, but probably can partner with development banks or other multilateral bodies to fund these. And we did find that a lot of investment in this sector does not come from multilateral bodies as much as it does in other sectors, probably, which could probably be because investment in digital was not seen exactly interrelated to elevation of poverty. But now, given that it's very important, there could be some emerging initiatives in this space.
Okay, the international agencies certainly understand the digital divide. Okay, they are reluctant to finance things that can be done by the private sector. That's the reason, not that
Right.
they don't understand. And the government has to ask help in closing the digital divide, in to admit it that, look, we aren't able to, the private sector is not going to reach the poor villages because there isn't enough demand for it. They cannot generate enough profits. So there has to be either from the better off people who can finance the NGOs who can get this done, or the governments who can say, look, here's a subsidy fund and you can get 20% capital subsidy for doing this. Because without it, you're going to be stuck with the dilapidated BSNL structure, which is a hangover of the old telephone system, which they converted to digital. And nobody in the cities uses BSNL. So how the hell can BSNL actually make money anymore to finance anything
Right.
in the villages? Because they are cross-subsidizing, but if your cross-subsidy vanishes, your source of subsidy vanishes, then you're not going to be able to do it. So it's a serious problem. But as I said, the politicians are not interested unless you can show the benefits. Just saying that we need to build this infrastructure, this digital divide, all this, none of this makes sense to anybody that I know. What they want to see is who's the beneficiary, what are you going to do for them, and then perhaps you can get some money. And as I'm just, let me say, pissed that the Indian private people don't support enough NGOs and foundations. And you go to Bangladesh, you find that Grameen is so well run, so well funded. BRAC is so well run, so well funded. Even in Sarvodaya in Sri Lanka is so well run, but we don't have, we do have NGOs in India. We have Seva in Ahmedabad and it has become Seva India and it's very well run, but we don't have enough. It's a huge country. We have a lot of things to do. And there aren't people who are actually doing it because they're still saying, listen, we have to uh, still manage the water supply. We have still manage the housing. We have to still upgrade the rural schools and the health clinics and so on. So it's not a priority that comes up. Unless you can show direct, clear benefits, it's not going to be a priority. And that's why I said the software is as important as the hardware. So the hardware will follow the software rather than the software following the hardware. When there is a demand that, listen, I'm a farmer and I want to, I'm a small farmer and I want to access this knowledge because I've been told by people that you can get this kind of information, then the governments will say, okay, we can find somebody who will get you the infrastructure that is needed. So I think if the software is there, the benefits are there, then only somebody will come in and do this infrastructure. But I'm not, at the international institutions, you know, they're kind of slow. I work for the World Bank quite a lot, 30 years. We are slow, we are bureaucratic and slow. We can't really do things in a nimble fashion. Okay. I mean, I love the World Bank. I'm very happy I work for the World Bank, but I also know why I work for the World Bank, because we can have an impact on a country at scale, not because we can do it quickly, because we can set up pioneering things, not because we can do it quickly. I mean, we rewrite every document 5 times, so what the hell can we do? I rewrite it 5 times, so I know what I'm doing. We are not nimble, we are not quick. We need nimble and quick people in this thing. Waiting for a loan from the World Bank or any other international institution is like saying you don't want to do it quickly. Okay. We cannot, the World Bank cannot do things quickly. It is what it is. I love it. I work for it. I'm happy I have to work for it. And they've given me a lot of freedom and a lot of, what should I say, benefits to working for them as a consultant. But I also know it, that what it cannot do. This it cannot do. So don't look there. Mitali is nodding as if she has some experience.
Yeah, so I've now been with the bank for about 3 years now. So, it's, and I've been with ADB since four to 5 years now. So I'm working with both. So, seeing the differences and seeing how, but I definitely think World Bank is much faster than ADB. With ADB, it's, if you think that in World Bank we write 5 times, in ADB we write 15 times.
You know, I worked once in a while with ADB, and I went to Malaysia for the Asian Development Bank, and the manager there, senior manager, asked me, what do I do? I said, I work mainly for the World Bank. He says, good, I'm happy to talk to you now. So, and once, honestly, I was so irritated with the Asian Development Bank that I said, please, I end this contract now, and can I send you your money back that you have paid me so far? I cannot work with you. Unfortunately,